Managing risk. Objectives and methods by which those objectives will be achieved should be aligned with the risk appetite of the organization. Risk management process. First is to identify the risk, analyze the risk, evaluate the risk, manage the risk, and monitor and review the risk. So, first, to identify the risk. That business is discovered in its operating environment. There are many types of risk: the legal risk, environmental, market, regulatory risk, and many more. Next, analyze risk. This is one identifies that the potential problems. It's time to go a little deeper. How likely are these risks to take place? If they take place, what will be the consequences be? During this step, if examines the probability and fallout of each risk to choose when to focus first, such as possible financial losses, time losses, severity of impact, and precisely analyzing each risk. Evaluate the risk. After analyzing is to evaluate the risk. Rank each risk by factoring both its possibility of happening and its potential impact of the project. In this step will help to identify useful solutions for each risk. Next will be manage the risk. After evaluating is to manage the risk. While you can't expect every risk, you should have set up the previous step for the success of your risk management process, starting with the highest priority of risk, either solving or attempt reducing the risk so that it's no longer a risk to a particular project. And then lastly, monitor and review the risk. Transparent communication among your teams and stakeholders is crucial for the ongoing monitoring and potential threats. Risks need to be continuously monitored to make sure risk mitigation plans are working to keep aware if risk becomes greater threat. Attitude towards risk. Management assessment and response to risk is shaped by its attitude towards risk. First, risk indifferent or risk neutral approaches do not focuses on risk as a factor when making decisions. This individual focuses solely on potential gains regardless of the risk. They are said to be risk neutral. Such behavior is to evaluate reward without the thought to risk may seem to be inherently risky. So next is risk seekers. They are willing to accept higher risk in exchange for the higher returns. Risk seeking confers a high degree of risk tolerance, or the amount of potential losses an investor is willing to accept. Then next is the risk seekers. So next is the risk averse. They are generally not willing to accept high risk and therefore are willing to accept lower returns. They are the investor who chooses the preservation of capital over the potential for higher than average return. They are not willing to accept high risk. So to review, first is they are the individual who are only focuses on reward without the thought of the risk. Then ang risk seekers, they are the investor na willing to accept risk. Then lastly, they are not the investor who are not willing to accept higher risk. So next will be risk response strategies. So first is the risk avoidance. Companies that avoid risk do not engage in an activity that has an acceptably high risk. Risk avoidance is stopping and avoiding any activities that could lead to risk. So next is the risk reduction or mitigation. Those are the companies that seek or to reduce or mitigate risk to take measures to counter the impact risk. Impact the risk. Risk reduction is focuses on action reduce the probability of the risk occurring or the impact of the risk. This is done by adjusting particular aspect of an overall project plan or organizational process or by seeking down its scope. Next is risk transfer or sharing. Companies can transfer or share the risk with outside entities or individuals. For example, is the insurance. It is the mechanism for transferring or sharing risk. Outsourcing and borrowing are forms of risk sharing. Next is risk retention. Represents the amount of the risk that management has consciously decided to accept or absorb. It occurs when risks have been evaluated and organization decides to accept the potential risk. No action is taken to decrease the risk, but a contingency plan may still be put in place. Next is risk exploitation or acceptance. Companies that exploit and retain or accept risk may little or no attempt to reduce risk and may seek out risk that other companies avoid. Liability or the hazard insurance. This insurance is means for sharing or transferring risk that specifies the risk is covered by the insurance. The hazard that increase like likelihood of loss is also covered by the insurance, and also the terms and conditions under with losses will be reimbursed to the insured. The next is managing operational risk. Specific operational risk and risk management methods include the following: the human error, the information technology failures, quantity risk, and process failures. The human error, the organization initiates human error, the organization initiates seminar and training for their employees. The next is the information technology failures. They are mitigated by continuous maintenance and review of their system. The next is the quality risk. It is mitigated by the total quality management programs addressing continuous improvement. Then lastly will be the process of their failures. They are mitigated by continuous process improvement programs and defects analysis.
Panagdahit sa tanan. So, this is my part 2 video, enterprise risk management. So, financial risk management, these methods are designed to mitigate the risk of loss related to asset valuation or cash flows. So, there are valuation risk includes interest rate risk, market systematic risk, Norman Gett and systematic risk, default risk, and price risk. So, cash flow risk include credit risk, liquidity risk. Financial risk management, there are interest rate risk. First, the exposure of an asset to functions in value in response to changes in interest rates. Second, interest-bearing securities that carry a fixed rate of interest will increase in value as interest rates fall and will decrease in values as interest rates rise. Third, responses include investment in floating rate securities that track market rates of the use of prescribed instruments such as interest rates swaps. So financial risk management is represent exposure to loss from investing in the market as a whole. Responses to market or systematic risks include investment or derivatives. So the options to sell securities at specific market price will when sold the owner again risk of loss of value over the period of the option. So the non-market and systematic risks, there are two. First represents exposure to losses and investment in specific companies or industries, mitigated through portfolio diversification.